Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of the Home Run Hitters podcast. I'm Charles Ficasian, along with my co-host Andrew Quinn. Andrew, how are you this evening?
Doing well, Chuck. How about you, man?
Not too bad. We're ready to chop it up again this week. We got some interesting things to talk about. A little bit of news and notes, some injury stuff, some extensions to talk about as well, and then we're just gonna kind of talk a little bit about some of the teams that we think have been a surprise so far this year, and some teams that have disappointed to begin the year. And we'll go a little more in depth with a couple players as well on each side of those spectrums. So why don't we begin with some of the news and notes, Andrew? Ke'Bryan Hayes, when the season began, received an 8-year, $70 million extension from the Pittsburgh Pirates. It's going to take him through the 2030 season. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's a great move by the Pirates. This is a front office that refuses to spend money pretty much historically. So a guy like Ke'Bryan Hayes, who's been a top prospect in their farm system for the past couple of years, we've seen him splash in the big leagues. He's an excellent defender. If it wasn't for Nolan Arenado playing third base in the National League, Ke'Bryan Hayes would be a contender for the Gold Glove Award there year in and year out. And he will be continuing to be in that spot for at least the next 8+ years. Like I said, though, I think it's a good move for Pittsburgh. He's a guy that they're going to be looking to build around. Maybe we'll see a Brian Reynolds extension next from them. If that happens, then Pittsburgh fans, you guys can get really excited about the future. But he's a great player. He's a guy that it's nice to see them commit to financially. It's great for him, obviously, to be getting paid. And, looking forward to seeing him in a Pirates uniform for years to come.
Absolutely. It's nice to see that a penny pinching team like the Pirates is finally willing to commit some big dollars to a player. So if you're a Pirates fan, that's something to be really excited about, having a core member of your team locked down instead of being floated around in trade talks. Next, I guess I'll talk about this a little bit. Aaron Judge and the Yankees were – I know this is frustrating.
A lack of an extension.
Could not reach an extension before the season started. The Yankees reportedly made an offer over $30 million a year for 7 years to Aaron Judge, but the two sides could not come together on a deal. Reports said that Aaron Judge wanted up to 9 or 10 years, a little more money, and the Yankees publicly said they weren't willing to commit to that. Now, as to whether that's the Yankees trying to paint Judge as the boogeyman or just a matter of, small things going on behind the scenes, we don't really know. But Judge will enter free agency after this year, and he has a chance to be signed away by another team. As a Yankees fan, that's a little concerning to me. As it pertains to 2022, I guess it's a good thing because whenever we see players, in a contract year, they kind of tend to step it up so that they can make more money on the open market. So I like that for Aaron Judge's 2022. But as for the future, that's a little scary to me because, outside of signing Garrett Cole, the Yankees don't really seem to like spending a lot of money on big players, instead choosing to portion it out in small pieces for other players. And that it hasn't really tended to work out so far, and especially this year. They didn't really spend too much money in the offseason. They made that one trade, which really hasn't paid off so far to begin this year. I've been kind of frustrated with that. But point being, I'm not really too optimistic about Aaron Judge returning to New York next year. Andrew, what do you think?
I definitely think that this is bad for his outlook in terms of returning to be a Yankee. I have heard some whispers that he's not going to leave New York, though, that the Mets are really interested in going after him, whether that's via trade this year, whether that's in the offseason coming up. But, I mean, here's the thing. Judge is a guy who has been a superstar caliber player really whenever he's healthy since he's been in the big leagues. We know what kind of power he can provide at the plate, and teams are going to pay for that power. He's going to put rears in seats. So he's going to get paid. Now, I frankly don't know if he's going to get a better offer than what the Yankees made to him, which is kind of frustrating to see a player not take that, big payday that they deserve to get. But, maybe it's just not a place that he wants to be long-term. Maybe he just doesn't like the bright lights of being a Yankee. Who knows, though? Who knows where he's going to end up? I'm sure for now, though, he's locked in on doing everything he can to help the club in New York and making sure that he's contributing. And he's been looking pretty good to start the season, too. So his trade value is certainly going to be there if the Yankees decide to sell him, during the season or before the trade deadline.
Yeah, I will say this, and I'll leave it at that. If the Yankees traded Aaron Judge to the Mets, I don't think the Yankees front office would live to see another day because the fans storm the offices and parade them out on the streets because they'd be so upset. But I'd watch out for the Dodgers in the offseason because the Dodgers always find a way to upgrade that roster and make it better. You know, they're going to be that and Trey Turner as he reaches free agency. I'm not going to bring him back. And you could easily shift some pieces around to make room for Aaron Judge in that outfield without question. So that's something
that's just not even going to be fair to see the Dodgers add a guy like him, though, to their already stacked team.
And that's why I hope it doesn't happen, but it's not something you can rule out because the Dodgers seem to get everybody. But
yeah, true.
We have a few injuries to report, mostly in the AL Central. They're kind of getting bit by the injury bug a little bit early. On the Twins, Byron Buxton had to leave a few games ago because of a knee injury. And Sonny Gray just got put on the IL today as well. So those are a couple concerning issues going on over there in Minnesota. And in Detroit, newly acquired Javi Baez was also placed on the IL today or yesterday with an injury as well. So he's going to be out for a little bit. I believe both he and Sonny Gray are on the 10-day IL. I don't think Buxton has been put on IL, but he has been day-to-day with his injury. But it's just something to keep an eye on, given that he does have a history of knee issues. So, Andrew, why don't you kind of take us through this?
Yeah. First of all, from a fantasy perspective, these are not guys that you need to be worried about their injuries and be dropping them right now. Obviously, if someone drops Byron Buxton because they're afraid of this injury, or someone drops Javi Baez, you have to scoop them up. Sonny Gray's a guy who might get dropped just because he wasn't a super highly touted pitcher going into this season. But I still really like his long-term outlook in Minnesota. So if he's a guy that's available and you can throw him on an IL spot in your bench, I would take a shot at him. But the great news about these injuries is that none of them are majorly concerning. Obviously, Buxton's was at first because of the nature of the injury and like we talked about his previous injury history. But Buxton looks like he's only going to be missing a little bit of time, and he was off to like an MVP caliber start to the season before he went hurt. So here's hoping that he can get back to that form pretty quickly once he gets healthy. Sonny Gray has a hamstring injury, so that's something to monitor because as a pitcher, you use your legs for a lot of power, and obviously they're stabilizers for you as you throw. So Sonny's going to need to make sure that gets right for him, but he's a veteran. I'm sure he's going to take all the time that he needs to get back. And he's not really someone who's had a ton of injuries, over the past couple of years, especially lower body injuries. So this might just be a one-time deal with the shortened spring training. And then Baez, I believe, is dealing with a thumb injury. I'm not 100% sure what that was caused by. It could have just been him swinging aggressively because we know he has an aggressive swing, but I'm sure he'll be back soon. That is a big hit for the Tigers early in the season with, losing their top player, but he's only going to be gone for probably another week or so. So I wouldn't be too worried about these guys for fantasy. Throw them in their IL stashes if you've got them on the bench and try to pick up a guy to throw in and replace them.
All right. You hear that, folks? That's some solid fantasy advice right there. Take advantage while you can. You got those open slots. Get some guys who can help you maybe win that matchup you're trying to push for. Moving on, though, there have been some surprises this year, and there have also been some disappointments this year. Just overall team-wide, there have been some rosters that, haven't really quite been able to put it together so far or are just performing below expectations. And on the other side, you got some teams that are red hot to begin the year. Maybe that's not something we necessarily expected. Andrew, why don't you give us a team that you think has exceeded expectations so far?
My team that's exceeded expectations so far is the Mets. And we knew that they were going to be competitive coming into the season, but I don't think that really any of us expected them to be 7-3 right now with the second best run differential in all of baseball at plus 26. Their starting pitching has been incredible to say the least, and they're getting contributions all the way from the number 1 down to the number 5 guy in their rotation. Like we predicted, like we talked about before the season started, Francisco Lindor already is having the starting of a resurgent season with New York. Pete Alonso has been swinging it well. And they're doing all of this. They're 7-3 right now without Jacob deGrom. So it's just going to be that much more scary for all the teams in the East when deGrom comes back and he's healthy. But the Mets are playing great baseball right now. They've only had 3 games at home. They're 5-2 on the road right now, which is pretty impressive. And like I said, that plus 26 run differential, that just shows early on in the season that they're a team that's going to be scoring a lot of runs and pitching and playing defense pretty effectively as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely a team that has been performing pretty well to begin the year, especially without, their best player in Jacob deGrom. So that's certainly some good news that you'd like to see. For me, it's the Angels. We've seen in the past the Angels haven't really been able to, go over the top. I've always said that it's been criminal that Mike Trout's only been the one playoff series in his entire career, and that was a sweep in the divisional round. But they've started off the year 6-4. Shohei Ohtani has been doing his thing. He's been pitching well, and he's been cranking dingers. So nothing out of the ordinary there. Jared Walsh has had also a very nice start to the year, and Mike Trout is Mike Trout. Anthony Rendon has been able to so far stay on the field, which is his biggest asset because he's an all-around contributor. We saw it in his days in Washington, but he just hasn't been able to do it yet with the Angels, but he's staying on the field and he's producing. And it's honestly, it's pitching with the Angels. As long as the Angels can continue to get, quality stars outside of starters, not named Shohei Ohtani, they will win because they have an offense that can put up gaudy numbers. And we've seen it so far to begin the year, and the pitching has done enough to keep them afloat. And honestly, I kind of expect them around the trade deadline, if things kind of stay where they are and they're going to be in that playoff push, to go out and get a starter or two if a starter becomes available. And with expanded playoffs now, you can bet the Angels are going to do everything they can to get into the playoffs because you simply cannot waste the primes of 2 top 10 players in baseball, I would argue, in Mike Trout and Shohei Ohtani.
I agree with that, and the Angels have been a good surprise to start the season. Like you mentioned, they've won their last 3. Shohei Ohtani's looking great. Mike Trout obviously being healthy, although he did get hit in the hand with a pitch earlier today. We were talking about this earlier before we went live, but X-rays came back negative on his hand, so that's a good sign. He's probably going to miss a couple of days at the minimum, just with the swelling from an injury like that and getting hit in that spot. But I wouldn't expect Trout to miss any more than a week. That's probably going to hurt the Angels a little bit, but getting off to a good start, like you mentioned, and in their division in the AL West, the 3 teams that are going to be competitive are going to be the Angels, the Astros, and the Mariners. The Mariners are at 5-5. The Astros are at 5-4. And then the Oakland A's have been kind of staying afloat at 5-5 as well. So that division is still pretty crowded all the way up in the middle. And then you have the Texas Rangers down at 2-7 to start the season. So, yeah, I think the Angels are in a good spot to start. We'll see how they do without Mike Trout and see how much they have to catch up after he comes back and he's healthy again.
Absolutely. I'd like to go on to another 2 teams who I think have kind of surprised a little bit so far. And seeing as how they're in your division, I think you can give us a little bit of input as well, Andrew. And now both the Cubs and the Pirates are 5-4 to start the year. Coming into the offseason, into this season, we didn't really kind of expect these 2 NL Central teams to do much because they didn't really do much to add to their rosters. They saw a lot of guys leave or just didn't do anything to upgrade their rosters. We all know about the Pirates and the Cubs. The Cubs let go of Anthony Rizzo, Chris Bryant, all those guys. Marcus Stroman, they all left. But here we are. They're both 5-4 to start the year, despite, expectations being much, much lower than that. Is there anything you can kind of give us in detail as to why that may be?
Yeah, well, to start with the Cubs, the Cubs are in a good spot, in my opinion, due to the not starting hot out of the gate performance that we've seen from the Milwaukee Brewers. The Cubs got to open their season against the Brewers at home, and they won 2 out of 3 games. The Brewers were the team that everyone kind of thought was going to be the power horse in the National League Central going into the year. And they're 5-5, and a big reason for that is because their starting pitching just hasn't been as effective out of the gate as we would like to see. Case in point, Freddie Peralta, who is arguably a number 1 or number 2 pitcher on most other teams in baseball. He's arguably the 3rd starter from Milwaukee. He didn't even make it through 3 innings in his start this week. And the Brewers have a -13 run differential. The Cubs have a +7 run differential, and there's only 2 teams in the NL Central with a positive run differential right now, and that's the Cubs and the Cardinals. The Cardinals are up there, obviously, because they're swinging the bat really well right now. They're scoring a lot of runs on offense, and that's been giving the pitchers a lot more leeway to work with. But the Cubs have been really, really effective, both with their offense as well as their pitching. The Cubs have actually scored 44 runs. They've scored more runs than the Cardinals. So they're swinging hot bats right now. Ian Happ started off the season very, very hot for Chicago. And the Pirates, the Pirates are a team that don't expect them to be competitive for the whole season, but they have some guys there for sure. They have Key Brian Hayes, like we've talked about. They have Brian Reynolds. They have some contributors around there. David Vogelbach is a Pittsburgh Pirate who's been around the league for a while, but, remember, he's a guy a few years ago in Seattle that hit 30-plus home runs. So they're going to score some runs too. But, with Pittsburgh, they don't really have the pitching that's going to be sustainable for them long term. But it is good to see, again, in the NL Central, you've got 4 teams with 5 wins right now. The Cardinals have the first place spot because they've had a couple of games get rained out and postponed. But the Brewers just haven't started out hot out of the gate. And I think that that's led to the success of the Pirates and the Cubs.
Yeah, absolutely. And on the other side of that spectrum, the Brewers have been kind of a disappointment to start the year. And Andrew, you kind of went into that a bit because their pitching, their vaunted pitching, with arguably three aces, has not quite lived up to expectations so far this year. We know that Corbin Burns kind of got lit up in his first start, and Freddie Peralta's had 2 back-to-back pretty mediocre, if not bad, starts as well. And it just doesn't help that the fact that the Brewers lineup as a whole has just been pretty gosh darn awful. I mean, Christian Yelich has been pretty mediocre, dating back to his really subpar 2021. And, I mean, outside of, I guess, Willie Adames and Rowdy Tellez, who have been okay, there's nobody else in that lineup who's been able to do anything whatsoever. And, when the pitching has been struggling like it has and the lineup isn't able to produce it all, you're going to see, if they weren't facing the Cubs and the Orioles to begin this season, I would have expected the Brewers to be at least a few games below 500.
Yeah, they're a team that we have high expectations for, like you said. What's been really surprising to me, too, is they haven't been using some of those horses out of their bullpen as frequently as in my opinion, as they should. They have Josh Hader, who's arguably one of the top 5, if not top 3 closers in all of baseball. They have Devin Williams, who won the Rookie of the Year award 2 years ago, who's a great relief pitcher with arguably the best changeup in all of baseball. And then Brad Boxberger, who's been a very serviceable relief arm for years. He's a former all-star reliever in that bullpen. They didn't use any of them except for they brought Hader out for a save today against the Cardinals. They didn't use them at all in any of those 3 games in that series, which is a surprise to me because, even if you're down by a run or 2, if you have a premier bullpen arm and you have an offense that you believe can score runs at any given moment, why not use one of your best guys to keep the game close? So it'll be interesting to monitor what decisions are coming out of Milwaukee in terms of the pitchers that they decide to use. But I would like to see them utilize that bullpen that is so scary for them a little bit more and a little bit better.
Absolutely. And I think in terms of, division contenders just across baseball, the Brewers probably have a case that they have the weakest lineup out of all of them because there just isn't a single guy in there who's supposed to strike fear into the hearts of your opponents. I mean, Christian Yelich used to be that, but he's kind of taken a tumble over the past couple seasons. So, I mean, I just don't see a guy in there who, you can look at and be like, all right, this is the guy that we have to get out. Or, this is the guy we pitch around to focus on the rest of the lineup. Like, all those guys in there, I feel like I could pitch to. If I was an MLB starter, I could pitch to them and not have to worry too much about it.
Yeah, I think the only guy that's really striking fear into opposing pitchers is Yelich just because of what he has done. But like you mentioned, he has not been the same hitter for the last year plus now that he was when he was, on his MVP caliber season. Their number 4 hitter is Andrew McCutchen. I mean, that just sums it up pretty much as well as it can right now. You have Andrew McCutchen, who is a great player. I love Andrew McCutchen, but he's on the tail end of his career. He's coming off of an ACL surgery where he missed an entire season less than 2 years ago. They're not going to be a team that's going to score a ton of runs, and they kind of know that their pitching is going to win them ball games. But I agree with you. You need to give yourself more of a cushion offensively. So who knows? I wouldn't be surprised to see them make some moves in the season to bring in some offensive pieces, unless they're banking on guys like Keston Hiura to re-break out again like he did a few years ago. Yeah,
it's an unfortunate situation, I guess, if you're a Brewers fan, because, you kind high expectations. You saw such great, improvements from your starting rotation last year. Corbin Burns had a Cy Young caliber campaign. Obviously, what Brandon Woodruff can do, and Freddie Peralta broke out as well. But they just aren't able to score right now, and that's going to be something to keep an eye on. But a way for you folks at home to score is by using Underdog Fantasy.
That was nice. Good one.
Who is a proud sponsor of us here at Sports Time HQ in the Home Run Hitters podcast. If you deposit a minimum of $10, Underdog will match any deposit up to $100 if you use code SportsTimeHQ. And with the season upon us, now's the time to use that app for any type of baseball bets that you may have.
Yeah, I'm definitely excited to be using Underdog right now. I've been using it a lot this offseason with some fantasy football drafts. But now that we're in the swing of it with baseball, it's time to start putting some spreadsheets together and seeing where we can be making some money back from Underdog. So I'm excited.
Absolutely. Next week, Andrew and I will be giving you guys some of our favorite bets for the games ahead in the next couple of days, and we can try to help you guys make a little money.
Awesome. Looking forward to it. Well, Chuck, let's why don't we jump into some individual fantasy performers that have been surprises so far this year. I figure we could just start with some of the hitters before we get into the pitchers. So I'm going to give you a couple. Well, we teased this before the show. We were talking about it, but I'm going to give the people at home a chance to just guess here. So the two hitters that are number 1 and number 2 right now in fantasy scoring are probably going to be a surprise to a lot of folks. So, Chuck, I told you, can you recall for the fine people at home who the number 1 and number 2 overall fantasy performers have been so far this season?
You're gonna hate me for this, but I think it's already slipped my mind because we got into all these different topics and stuff already. So I guess
that's okay. I'll give you a hint because one of your guesses pre-show was Stephen Kwan. It is not Stephen Kwan, who has been a preseason fantasy darling for many and been a popular waiver wire addition. He's not at the top spot, but one of the guys who's in the top 2 might have been available on your free agency wire. He's probably not now anymore. The number 2 scorer in all of fantasy baseball right now is CJ Cron, first baseman from the Colorado Rockies. He's been a pleasant surprise offensively, and that's been bolstered by the fact that he has 5 home runs already to start the season, which is tied for the league with Vladimir Guerrero Jr. Vladimir Guerrero Jr. is ranked number 4th overall, but CJ Cron is up there at number 2 overall. He scored 7 runs, driven in 10, and his OPS is 1232. Chuck, what do you think? Is this just the Coors Field effect, or is CJ Cron somebody that you're high on? Is he a sell high for you? Like, I've got him on a couple redraft league rosters right now. What should I be doing? Should I hold? Should I try to trade him away? What do you think?
Yeah, if you're in the Dynasty League, he's an absolute trade because I think you're kind of enjoying the Coors Field effect where he's going to perform well in a lot of his home games because he's got that beneficial Colorado air. But if you have him in a redraft league, I would just reap the benefits. We saw him do this last year where he hit over 30 home runs, drove in 80-plus runs, and that's something you take on a fantasy team every day. But for redraft, I would just hold on to him. For Dynasty, I would trade him. You could probably get a decent prospect back or just a younger player if you're looking to move your team in that particular direction.
So let me give you a hypothetical Dynasty trade. So you have CJ Cron and another manager offers you Joe Adell, who is a promising prospect, but he's been shaky so far this year. Are you going to take that trade?
Probably not, because Joe Adell has seen some significant time already in the majors and hasn't really been able to put it together too much yet. I think I'd want someone with maybe a little bit more of a safer floor.
Okay. How about CJ Cron for Dylan Carlson with the Cardinals?
That's something I might be willing to consider a little bit more. Dylan Carlson, he's only in his early to mid-20s. I believe he's 25, 26. You can correct me if I'm wrong since you are the Cardinals fan, but I believe he's around that age range. Switch hitting outfielder. He's beginning to put it together as of late. Last year, he started to see some improvements, and this year, I think he's going to put it together and have a really good season. So I think that's something I'd be willing to buy in on.
Okay, how about let me see if this is a smash accept for you. CJ Cron for, I don't know, Hunter Green, who we've just seen make his major league debut within the last week.
That's a smash accept right there for me. If I'm that kid looks special.
He does. He does. If you are in a league with some guys that haven't been paying too much attention to the waiver wire, if Hunter Green is still available, he is a must add in every format. Just lock him in as one of your starting pitchers. Set it and forget it on days he's starting. He looked really, really special, even just the other night pitching against the Dodgers. I got to watch a couple innings of that game, and even in the fifth inning, he was still getting all the way up to 102 with his fastball. So I just can't even imagine how not fun that is to be facing a guy like him.
Yeah, absolutely. On another note, I guess a guy who has been a little bit of a disappointment considering the hype we heard surrounding him coming into this year, Royals top prospect Bobby Witt Jr., who's coming in. Granted, there is a position switch because they're having him play third base, but as of a couple of days ago, he was only 2 of 20 with 6 strikeouts, which is a bit of a disappointment, I admit. So I'm wondering if a move down to AAA for a little while could be in the cards, or if the Royals are just going to stick with him because he hasn't been putting too much production down simply for Kansas City this early on in the season. What are your thoughts, Andrew?
So I agree with you that he has been struggling offensively, but let's take a step back and look at this from like an organizational standpoint. So you have Bobby Witt Jr., who is one of the top prospects in baseball as well as in your organization. He is a versatile infielder. He could probably even get moved to outfield down the line, but they're experimenting with him at third base, and he's been playing really well defensively. I know that doesn't factor into anything we care about from a fantasy standpoint, but that is something that does matter a lot to these teams, is the defensive production that they're getting. And he's been a very serviceable third baseman so far this season. The Royals aren't really playing for anything this year, though. And I think that's what's important, is that they've already taken steps to bring in some new faces and some younger talent to get acquainted with the big leagues. So am I worried about Bobby Witt Jr. getting sent down to AAA? Not really. I think that he's going to stay up because of the contributions that he's making all around the field on defense. But his hitting has been a struggle. He's batting 156 right now. He's 5 for 32 at the plate. He has scored 4 runs, which is promising to see that he's doing well when he does get on base. And he only has 1 stolen base this year. But again, that's probably due to the fact that he's just not getting on base too much. So I think it'll straighten out for him. I wouldn't be too worried about him. He's probably somebody that I would confidently say, unless you have to start someone and he's in the lineup, I would probably try to pick someone else up that you can start in a third base or a shortstop position for now until he starts to turn things around offensively. But definitely don't drop him in Dynasty. In redraft, I would consider it depending on who's available on your waiver wire. But, again, I think it's going to turn around for him. I'm not expecting him to be like a 300 hitter this year, but I wouldn't be surprised to see him hit 250 or 260.
Sure. Let's hope that things turn around for Bobby sooner rather than later. But I'd like to talk about another former top prospect in AL Central who's had a really explosive start to the year, and that's Andrew Vaughn over on the White Sox. We saw him struggle a little bit when he came up last year. The White Sox gave him an extended period of time. He hit 235 with 15 home runs, 48 RBIs, but 101 strikeouts and only 469 plate appearances. But starting in 2022, he's off to a red-hot start, to put it simply. He's 8 for 23. He's hitting 348. He's already hit 2 home runs, knocked in 6 guys. On-base percentage of 400, which is incredible. OPS of 1,052. And, for a White Sox lineup that hasn't seen really significant contributions from too many other players, it's nice to kind of see a former prospect start living up to his pedigree in Andrew Vaughn.
Yeah, Vaughn has been a very pleasant surprise for the White Sox, and a team like Chicago that is going to need to be competitive. It's great to see that they have a guy that, early on in the season so far, it looks like he's going to be a guy that they can kind of plug in at first base, plug in at the outfield, and he's going to contribute for them whenever they need him to. What stands out to me a lot so far with Vaughn is in every game that he's played in, except for one, he has gotten at least 1 hit. So he's going to be a consistent hitter. He's probably not going to give you too many goose eggs or negative performances offensively. And like we've talked about really since the beginning of our podcasting days together, Chuck, in fantasy, you want good players on good teams. You want good hitters on good offenses. Andrew Vaughn's going to be hitting around Eloy. He's going to be hitting around Jose Abreu. He's going to be hitting around Tim Anderson. Those guys are going to be on base for him if he's batting lower in the lineup. He's going to get plenty of run scoring opportunities. And if he continues to show that he has, some legit pop, if he's a guy that could hit 20, 25 home runs this year, he's a must start every day for you, because you never know when he's going to pop and when he's going to have, a big 5 or 6 RBI day, just because the whole White Sox offense is rolling.
Right. That's certainly something interesting to keep tabs on, because there are a lot of guys in that White Sox lineup that, I'd absolutely love to have on my fantasy teams, especially for Dynasty. Luis Robert is one. I think that kid's incredibly special. We mentioned Eloy Jimenez, who's coming into his own as a slugger. And if Andrew Vaughn can keep this up, the White Sox are going to have a really nice core of players. Not to mention Yoan Moncada as well. And, these Jose Abreu may be older, but he's still putting up some very good numbers at that first base spot as well. And Yasmani Grandal as well is a catcher who seems to age like fine wine. And we know the White Sox can pitch. They've got some good starters. Lucas Giolito. You mentioned Dylan Cease a little earlier on, who's had a couple of good starts as well. Michael Kopech has finally transitioned to the rotation, which is something I've been really hoping for, because he has absolutely electric stuff.
Mm-hmm. And one other guy, too, that might be kind of a deeper stash from the White Sox, as well as a guy who I think if he's available in a dynasty league and you have a deeper bench or like a taxi squad slot that you can throw him into, go ahead and pick this guy up, is Jake Berger. He's a name that maybe is not super familiar, but he was the White Sox first-round draft pick back in 2018, I believe. He played his college baseball at Missouri State. I actually played against him in high school for a couple of years. Jake is he actually got called up for his major league debut earlier this week. He's a third baseman, corner infielder. He can play a little bit of first base, but he's young. And unfortunately for Jake, he had 2 major injuries while he was in the minor leagues. He had a torn Achilles, and then he had, I believe, a torn knee, torn ACL. So he missed basically 2 full seasons of minor league time, but yet he's up in the big leagues right now. And he's still a pretty young guy. He's only, I believe, 25 or 26 years old. So he's somebody to look out for, and he might be an injury away from playing. But in a deeper league, again, you want good hitters on good offenses. If you can, throw a guy like Jake Berger in one of your slots, just see if he breaks out, I would go ahead and try to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. That sounds like a very worthy stash, in my opinion. Another player I want to talk about is C.J. Abrams over in San Diego, because obviously Fernando Tatis has been hurt, but the Padres have been experimenting a little bit. C.J. Abrams has seen some time in right field for the Padres, because it sounds like San Diego obviously wants to keep Fernando Tatis at shortstop. We all know at the end of last year that they were kind of experimenting a little bit. They put Tatis in the corner outfield spots for a few games as well, put him in center field even as well, to see if he could play out there. But seeing Abrams out there, is giving me a little bit of hope that these 2 top shortstop prospects can coexist on the field at the same time. And Abrams has, had a solid start to the season, nothing special, but I think he's a guy who can stick out there long term.
Yeah, I really like C.J. Abrams as a player. In terms of a fantasy contributor, he's probably not somebody that's going to be a huge mega producer for you this year, just given the fact that he is so young and that this is his first taste of big league action. But C.J. Abrams is exciting because he's a great defender. We all know that he is a very capable middle infielder, and he has the talent that you need in an outfielder. He's a very fast runner. He's got the speed to potentially steal 40 bases in a season at some point when he becomes a full-time player. But offensively, he struggled out of the gate. He's hitting under 100 right now. He's only 2 for 24 on the season. He does have a solo home run, which has, shown that he does have some pop. And what's interesting is he only has 5 strikeouts in those 24 at-bats, but also only 2 walks. So when I look at something like that, he's got good contact ability. His strikeout rate is under 20%, which is pretty decent at the big league level. But only 2 walks and 26 plate appearances, to me, shows that he's probably pretty trigger happy right now, which is not uncommon. I mean, Chuck, take a step back and imagine that you got a call, hey, tomorrow, Chuck, you're going to be batting 9th for the Yankees, and you're just going to DH. You don't need to worry about playing in the field, but you're batting 9th, and you're getting the green light every pitch. We want to see you hit. You're probably going to be swinging at pretty much anything close just because you're so amped up, you're so excited. That's kind of what we're seeing from Abrams. So just like we talked about with Bobby Witt Jr., Abrams is a guy that in Dynasty you definitely need to hang on to. He is a top prospect. He does have that ceiling, kind of like an Adalberto Mondesi, where he might be a guy that can, be a 20-20 or even a 30-30 guy down the road potentially. But right now in redraft, he's probably someone that, unless you need a shortstop or an outfielder that is going to get significant, regular playing time right now, I probably would leave Abrams on the waiver wire.
Yep, that's probably the best bet. Unless it's dynasty, not a guy you need to necessarily have right now unless you're desperate. Before we move on to our closing stuff, I did want to talk about just a team that I'm of the mind has been kind of a bit of a disappointment so far, and that's my Yankees. I just feel like I have to talk about it. They're 5-5 to start the year. They started out great, taking 2 out of 3 from the Red Sox, and they split with the Blue Jays. But then just an absolutely colossal disappointment of a series, losing 2 out of 3 to the lowly Baltimore Orioles, and they just got shut out today at 5-0. And they only scored in, I believe, 2 or 3 of the 27 innings that they played against Baltimore, which is just an absolutely pathetic pretty much state of occurrences. And if you look at their lineup, because they have 10 guys that kind of get regular playing time because they got 10 guys for 9 spots, only 4 of them are hitting above league average. And that's Aaron Judge, Giancarlo Stanton, DJ LeMahieu, and Aaron Hicks, believe it or not. Probably my least favorite Yankee, but Aaron Hicks has been producing, so I guess you can't be mad at that. But some of these other guys have just been absolutely brutal to begin the year. I mean, starting catcher Kyle Higashioka is 2 of 21. Anthony Rizzo's been supplying some power, but he's only hitting 219. Gleyber Torres, 5 of 28. Isaiah Kiner-Falefa, 4 of 28. Josh Donaldson's 8 of 36 with 13 strikeouts, which is just simply way too many Ks. Joey Gallo, 4 of 28 with 11 strikeouts. I mean, it's kind of Joey Gallo for you, but no power, which is very concerning. It's just not what I hoped for. I guess I was hoping for some positive regression, especially from guys like Gleyber Torres and Joey Gallo, because I was willing to attribute Joey Gallo's struggles to being traded to a new team last year. And Gleyber Torres played shortstop last year, so I think that kind of got into his head. But starting this year, these are not the things you want to see. And the Yankees, coming into this offseason, we're saying, we're going to make some upgrades. We want to get fast. We want to get athletic. We want to, more contact guys. But the results simply haven't been there. And I'm inclined to hold some of the front office members at fault for that because they simply haven't made the team better. But I could just be ranting, but feel free to give me your 2 cents there, Andrew, on what you think, if you've seen anything at all from the Yankees so far.
I think that the loss and the lack of offensive contributions against Baltimore can be somewhat attributed to did they play the Blue Jays before they went to Baltimore?
They did.
The Blue Jays are a tough team, and they're going to be really competitive in the East. And I think that after playing a team like the Blue Jays and frankly getting beat, pretty sure-handedly, the morale's probably just low. I'm not too worried about the Yankees long-term. Again, as long as they stay healthy, I think that they're going to put themselves in the position they need to be competitive down the stretch. And that's really all that you can ask for in a division like the AL East that's going to have 4, basically 4 teams that there's a scenario where all 4 of those teams could be in the playoffs, But the early offensive struggles are interesting, especially because they've gotten to play so much at Yankee Stadium where, that's just a very hitter-friendly ballpark. But, again, like you mentioned, Rizzo started off hot, but he's kind of cooled off a little bit. Stanton's hitting the ball well, but he's not really driving the ball out of the park, at the rate that we expect to see from him. Judge only has 1 home run, too. The Yankees are a team that when they're hot, they're going to be rolling. And right now they're just not hot. So, as a Yankees fan, it's probably tough for you because you guys want them to win every single night. But, it's a long season, Chuck. We can't be judging too much after 2 weeks of games so far, 10 plus games for some of these teams.
That's fair. I guess it's frustrating to see just a larger portion of the lineup. If it was just 1 or 2 players who were kind of struggling, that's something I could absolutely understand. And it's not like they got the brakes beaten off them by Toronto. They split that series. It was a hard-fought series. They basically traded blows. I think they alternated wins and losses. But it's just, it was the same issue last year. The Yankees went 11-8 against the Orioles in 2021, and every single other team in the AL East performed better against Baltimore than they did. The Red Sox won 13 games. I think the Blue Jays only lost like 2 games against the Orioles, and the Rays absolutely beat the crap out of the Orioles as well. So if you can't do well in those division games against weaker opponents, that's going to cost you down the road. So I think it's kind of more just a thing of that than anything else.
Yeah. Well, we'll see what adjustments get made for them moving forward. Hopefully some of their offensive guys can continue to step it up. And honestly, like, I would just love to see Garrett Cole not give up a bomb in the first inning. If he can do that in his next start, they're probably going to win. So hopefully he can just keep the fastball from, like he was getting mad at himself after Vladdy hit that one out the other night that was right in on his hands. And he was like walking back to the dugout and was like, yep, that one was up. Gosh dang it. Probably didn't say gosh dang it, but no, Garrett Cole, he's going to be fine. He's had a little bit of struggles just early in ball games, but, hopefully he can settle in. And once he settles in, I think the rest of the Yankees will follow suit. They need to win games that he starts just flat out.
Shout out to Nestor Cortez, 12 strikeouts in 5 innings today. I think he's a guy you should pick up for your fantasy teams because he had a great year last year. And he's if he can keep finding a way to miss bats like that, he's basically locked in as the 4 or 5 starter in New York, and I think that's going to be incredibly valuable because like you said, I think the Yankee bats will pick up going forward, and Nestor Cortez is a guy who can give you some innings, and if he's going to rack up Ks, that's only a good thing for fantasy.
He's funky too. He's kind of like Johnny Cueto in the sense that he really likes to mess with the timing of hitters, and he'll mix his delivery up. So he's just a fun guy to get to watch play too. So if you're a guy that likes to add players so that you can watch them play, then yeah, go ahead and throw Nestor on your roster for that reason, if anything else. And he does have a nice mustache, way nicer than mine. So
he is certainly fun. Unfortunately, folks, we do have to cut it a little early today, but we hope you enjoyed our show. We'll be back next week with some more fun news and notes, some more fantasy things. We'll give you some cool and underdog bets as well to help you win a little money. If you got anything else to say, Andrew, by all means, go ahead.
No, I just want to make a note that it's April 17th, and the Cardinals are currently in first place in the National League Central. We will check back in a week and see if that is still the case. My prediction is no, they will not be leading the NL Central in 1 week, but I am very happy to see them doing well to start the season. Nolan Arenado for MVP. I'll leave it at that.
No complaints here. He's on my fantasy team, so I'll take that. All right, thanks for tuning in today, folks. We're the Home Run Hitters Podcast. You can find us at Sports Time HQ, and we're also sponsored by Underdog Fantasy.
All righty, take care, everybody. Have a good night. Happy Easter.